So you ready to get on with this?
Yep.
You see there's a table of contents added to it. That way you just click on that and then go click there and then ba-doom, ba-da-da-da. Straight to the thing. For those on ebook, good job. The blinding light. Anyway, hello guys! Welcome to a podcast. This is gonna be a part of the podcast, so be careful. I'm afraid to look on the meat. Oh no. Anyway, we'll be speaking about the Lost Stone and a lot of lore behind both the Lost Legend world and Hearthstone, and backstories. Mostly a lot of backstories. And we might spoil something for the next book, if this actually goes well, and people actually like this book.
Yes. I just spaced out.
Anyway, we shall begin with the blinding light. I'm gonna speak. First, let's test out the voices. Hi, my name's Emily. My name's Death! My name's.
I pictured Death to be like a deeper.
Death is very deep. She has a deeper voice. Hi, my name's
Death.
Emily. Hi, my name's Emily. Hi, my name's Legend. Since I'm not here right now on the call, and I'm busy with a lot of stuff. My name's Yo-Girl Nightmares.
I'm the British one, right?
If you want to be, it's your person.
My British accent is terrible.
Try doing an Australian accent.
Okay, I learned how to do an Australian accent from watching, what was it? H2O, I think. It was a show about like mermaids or something, yeah.
They're not British.
They were Australian though.
Yep.
Yeah. Steal my hairbrush. Okay.
How's the pearl in this world gonna sound like?
I'm not sure yet.
Could just be a normal voice, or it could be a Australian voice.
Hello, my name is Paul. I'm from Australia, where we have a ton of insects and spiders. I would not recommend going there. I mean, like there's a season where it rains spiders from the sky. They like jump off of a high place and they just rain down. It's super gross.
Why am I laughing about that?
It's an actual real thing too. I learned about it and it was like, ew, I don't want to go to Australia.
But I thought you were from Australia. Alright, shall we begin?
Raining. Australia. It already knew what I was going. Sorry, I'm typing this up. Ew! Ew! It's so gross. Ew! It even moves like silk. like spider web silk
You're still the strawberry.
on the ground.
Are you still
I
the strawberry?
am.
People won't
I am
recognize your
indeed.
face. They won't see your true face. Anyway, shall we begin?
Yes.
Alright. I'm gonna move this over so I can see. The blinding light. The Lost Legend world. Emily drew a special glyph that Lydia had taught her the last time they were in her world. Emily drew a circle with shapes and lines inside that, when touched, will create something like, for example, ice, water, fire, plants, etc. She began to speak in violin. Her body glowed a bright yellow as dragon wings appeared. She started to levitate off the ground. Death possessed a body and stood near her. The glyph started to glow as Emily continued speaking the spell. After Emily's last encounter with the Ninoan demon, her and the Resistance are now looking for help from different worlds. Though Millie did not want Emily to risk herself going to another world with the possibility that she could get stuck, so after the information given by Lydia and Midnight, she came up with a glyph combination that could make it safer to travel between worlds. Her wings wilted and disappeared. Her eyes stopped glowing and her hair turned back to its normal brown color. Emily! Emily! Death yelled. Emily collapsed, and the light lifted off the ground into a portal. I'm fine. Emily stood and wobbled a little to regain balance. You sure? Death asked, with a ting of worry. Yes, I am, Emily replied. Light filled the cavern they resided in as they began to walk to the portal. Wait, we don't know what's safe. We don't know if it's safe, Death said, holding Emily back. She smiled. It's cute how much you care, Emily said with a chuckle. Death blushed a bright red, but Death still held Emily back. Come on, how bad can it be? Emily asked, and pushed past Death. I mean, a whole other world. Also, Death, we have the spell to get back here, remember? Emily chuckled. Death blushed more in embarrassment. I know. It's just the last time we went into another world, it was because we were supposed to be imprisoned there, if you don't remember. Death replied in an angry tone. Emily nodded and proceeded to walk towards the light. Death sighed and pulled out her black and red scythe. Death used her magic to make it appear in her hands from behind her back. The colors reflect on her aura is so black means dark demigod, and red means demon. Emily laughed and walked into the light until fully submerged. If we die in there, I say I told you so, Death yelled into the light and slowly walked in after Emily. Switch over to Hearthstone. As the legend ran to the hole that led to the spider spawner, Nightmares and Pearl emerged from the water. Nightmares hacked and coughed up water, while Pearl laughed at the sight. They had gone through a successful mining trip and returned with about 42 iron. Why did we decide to go through the spider spawner? Ugh! Nightmares grunted and coughed up more water.
That was your idea?
Pearl replied, holding a hand to Nightmares. She reluctantly accepted the hand and stood. What happened down there? Merchant asked. She didn't go with them because she was working on her house back in the village.
Well, we ran into some monsters and then we found some more iron, which I got really excited about. But Mez just had to look at an Enderman and almost got killed by him.
Pearl said, hanging on to the word had to. It wasn't my fault I accidentally looked at him. You could have warned me about it being there. Nightmare yelled, throwing her hands up in frustration.
Yes, it was.
Pearl said. Legend just laughed at how her friends argue over the stupidest things. But during all the commotion, Pearl noticed something in the sky. It wasn't the moon, which had gotten out at the time, but something else. It was brighter and more star-like.
Guys, what's that?
Pearl asked. She pointed to the light. Legend noticed it also, but failed to mention it. Mez looked up. A couple of red sparks flew from her gloves. One of the sparks landed on Pearl's sleeve.
Well, Mez, what was that for?
Pearl asked as she patted at the glowing spark. Sorry, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to control my powers. Mez scratched the back of her head. Pearl glared for a second, then returned her attention to the light that appeared to be coming closer. Legend noticed it coming straight towards them and pushed Pearl away and fished Mez out of the way of the light with a fishing rod. The light crashed to the ground, throwing them backwards. Mez landed perfectly on her feet, and Pearl had been lifted off into the air, teleported to the ground. Legend. She tumbled and slid, only to be landing on her back. Mez ran to Legend and helped her up.
Are you guys okay?
Pearl asked as she ran to them. I think so, Legend replies, and thanking Mez for her help, for helping her. But Mez didn't reply. She just stared at the light. One of her eyes glowed through the shadow that is over her eyes. Pearl noticed and walked over to her, putting her hand on Mez's shoulder.
Are you okay?
Pearl asked, softly squeezing Mez's shoulder. Yeah, I'm fine. Why? Mez asked, looking at Pearl.
Well, your eye is glowing.
Pearl replied, pulling Mez in front of her. Mez pushes away, and a red trident appears in her hands. Don't! Mez trails off as a zombie jumps and attacks Pearl. Mez impaled it with her trident as it returned to her.
Thanks. Also, your trident has loyalty?
Pearl asked, pulling out an iron axe. I guess, Mez replied. Legend just stared at the trident and then turned her attention to the light when a dark figure came into view and approached them. Guys! Legend yells, motioning towards the light. The figure stepped into the darkness of the night. Pearl was surprised to see a girl with long light brown hair and bright yellow eyes. Hello, the girl says, bowing. Mez tightened her hold on her trident, and so did Pearl and her axe. Hi, I'm Legend, Legend says, smiling and walking over to the girl. Mez saw another figure coming out of the light. Legend, stop! Mez yelled, but Legend kept walking. So, what's your... Legend was cut off as Mez trident appeared in front of her.
Dude, what the heck?
Pearl asked, alarmed. I'm not letting Legend get killed, Mez whispered. Pearl didn't see the second figure come out of the light. It was a black-haired girl with midnight black skin and scarlet red eyes. She could barely see her if it wasn't for the light. Emily! Hold on, I'll be right back. The black-haired girl yelled, running with the scythe in hand. As the trident returned to Mez, Pearl pulled Legend away. Stay behind us, Mez said in a serious tone and turned towards the two girls. Get behind me, the dark-haired girl said, tightening her grip on her scythe. As the light began to dim, the dark girl seemed to have disappeared.
Who are you?
Pat asked. She got into a ready stance. Mare was ready to throw her trident. What's it to you? Dark Guild retorted. Death, stop, the other girl said, putting a hand on Death's shoulder. Emily? Death whispered. Emily smiled warmly. The two stared at each other, conversing about their situation. Death's expression changed as she threw down her scythe, and the two bowed. What the? Legend, Pearl, Matt, and Matt sang in unison. I'm sorry about how I acted. I was just taking precautions. Death whispered. Emily elbowed her in the side. More monsters were coming, and they needed to get to safety. I guess we have no choice now. Come on, Matt instructed. Pearl nodded and headed towards her house, while Matt and Legend led the two girls to the settlement. Where are we going? Emily asked, pulling out her swords as they ran. We are going to a safe house, Legend responded, smiling at Emily. Emily smiled back, nodded. As they batted away the incoming mobs, Matt was able to open the door and let the three in before closing it and blocking it up. Matt, what are you? Legend asked. Her ears pricked up as she heard all the skeletons and horde of mobs that were coming. I'll lead them away. Don't worry. I'll be careful, Mare replied, giving Legend a reassuring smile before blocking the door. Hey, over here! You want some fresh meat? Mare yelled as she ran. Her eye glowed a dark red as her trident appeared again. Mare, are you still out there? Legend yelled through the blocked door, but no reply came. Tears formed in Legend's eyes. Emily went over to her and patted her on the head. I bet she's fine, Emily whispered into Legend's ear. No, you don't get it. She's on her last life. And she... Legend fell to the ground. She was sad and angry at the same time. But she had to trust that Mare would be okay. Death sat on a bed and began to doze off. Emily led Legend over to a bed. You need some rest, Emily said, putting a blanket over Legend's legs. So do you, Legend replied through a wave of angry tears. And Emily did sleep. The next morning, Legend woke up to the smell of cooked meat. She bolted up and looked to see Emily putting coal in the furnace while Death supervised. Ah, the wolf girl's awake, Death said with a smirk. Legend gave her a confusing look. The door had been unblocked and Pearl stood in the doorway. Pal! Legend yelled, running and hugging her. Have you seen Matt? Legend asked. Pearl shook her head, and Legend covered her mouth, fearing for the worst.
She could have just... She could be just getting out of her base. It was a bit of a... I'm sorry. Okay. She could have... Okay. She could be just getting out of her base. That was a big hole last night,
Pearl replied, trying to give Legend comfort. She's so stupid sometimes. Going out there in the middle of the horde is just... Legend was cut off when Mare appeared behind Pearl. Stupid, I know, Mare replied, laughing. Legend ran up and hugged her softly. I thought you were... Legend couldn't bring herself to say it. Dead? I think you mean dead. Mare laughed, embracing Legend. Pearl gave her a thumbs up.
You stupid demon.
Pearl said in a joking tone. Hey, it takes one to know one, Mia joked. Pearl laughed with her and embraced them. Emily and Death shrugged at each other. Is anybody hungry? Emily asked, holding up a freshly made steak. Boy, am I ever! Mare said, running up to Emily and eating the steak in one mouthful. Emily jumped in surprise at how fast Mare ate it.
There.
Pearl said in surprise. Her cheeks flushing a bright red. Oh, what are my manners? My name is Nightmares. Mare smiled and stuck out a hand. Emily took it and shook it. Nightmares seemed to be in a better mood than last night. Whoa, you seem different, Death exclaimed. Mare smiled at her. What do you mean? Mare asked as her smile fell. Pearl pulled her aside.
Can I talk to you for a second?
Pearl asked. Mare nodded as they walked to the side of the settlement where the garden was. What was Death talking about? Mare asked. Pearl sighed. Okay.
What?
We're at the end of page 9.
Okay, so do you remember something's last night?
Pearl trailed off. Mare just gave her a confused expression. However, Pearl couldn't see her expression. Yeah, why wouldn't I? Mare asked, backing away slowly from Pearl.
You were acting strange. You weren't yourself. You were more alert and angry, as if you knew.
Pearl trailed off again, and she kept looking side to side, which worried Nightmares. You aren't saying I... Nightmares asked, quivering at the thought.
No, I didn't mean that. I was just wondering what else you remember from last night.
Pearl asked, her expression full of worry and doubt. I remember going into the spider spawner and going up the waterway, but after inhaling so much water, I guess I blacked out. All I can remember is that I was in darkness, as if I was asleep. But then I was above the ground, then I saw Death, and I heard the other girls say her name and introduce themselves, then everything went dark again. And the last thing I remember from last night is running. Just running. And falling down my stairs into the water pad and going to bed, Mare exclaimed. It worried her. What did I do? Mare asked, backing away.
You did magic, and you have powers, but that didn't seem to be a surprise for you.
Pearl said, showing Nightmares her sleeve where a dark spot was. I don't have powers. Pearl, you know this, Mare said. Tears began to fall from Nightmare's cheeks.
But you do. You summoned a trident, for heaven's sake.
Pearl yelled. Mare shook her head. I don't have powers, Mare yelled. It wasn't me. I don't have powers. Whatever you saw, it wasn't me, Mare said. She didn't know why she was acting this way.
I'm sorry. I guess you aren't used to saying that. Not ever since.
Pearl trailed off. She went over and hugged Nightmares.
You need therapy, don't you?
Pearl joked. Yes, I guess I do. Mare replied, embracing Pearl.
Legend is probably worrying about us. We should go back inside and enjoy some more meat.
Pearl chuckled and smiled at Mare. Mare returned it. As Mare and Pearl went back inside, they realized they were in the middle of a conversation. So what did you mean by last life? I mean, doesn't everyone have only one? Emily asked, sitting down, having a puzzled look on her face. What? No! We have 5 lives! not one. But when you die with all your life spent, you are dead forever, unless... Legend trailed off, seeing Pearl Nightmare, giving her a soft glare. Why, are you a necromancer? Death asked, jumping from her bed and standing only a couple of inches from Legend. Mare's face hardened. What? Legend replied, feeling uncomfortable. Death backed away, noting Legend's expression, then stared at Mare. A necromancer. You know, a person who can communicate with the dead. He can tell the future and stuff. Let alone rise the dead. Huh. Legend said, smiling gleefully. Legend looked at her, horrified by what she had just heard. No! I'm not a necromancer thingy! Legend said, backing away. Mare pulled out an iron sword. If you dare hurt Legend, you'll pay the price, Mare said, the sword shaking in her hands. Like as if you could hurt me, mortal. You're on your last life, Death said. Okay.
Wait, yo. Hey!
Wait, you're... Mare trailed off. Yes, I am, Death replied, her eyes glowing a soft, warm red light. Mare dropped her sword.
What? What is she?
Pearl asked, worried about her friend. She's the Grim Reaper, Mare whispered. Death chuckled devilishly. That's enough, Emily said, standing up. Oh, Emily, can you let me have some fun at least? Death asked, as her scythe faded away. You told me that if we get killed, I told you so. But you seem to be the reason we are going to get killed, Emily said, pointing at Death. She scoffed and sat back on her bed. So, when are you leaving? Legend asked, if in the most respectful way possible. We have to be gone before the night of the full moon, Emily replied. Mare's expression changed.
That's in 2 days.
Pearl muttered through a mouthful of steak. Well, then I guess we'll stay here for 2 days, Death replied. Legend noticed that she hadn't eaten anything. Death, you must be starving. Why not eat some steak with us? Unless you don't eat... Legend trailed off. Pearl and Mare gave her the same soft glare, and Mare shook her head. I don't have a physical body, so I can't eat human food. Instead, I eat Emily's anger and sadness and a little grief, Death replied, trying to smile. Emily sighed profoundly and set down her half-eaten steak and walked over to Death, which bent down and bit Emily on the arm. The three cringed at how painful that must be, but instead, Emily was laughing. All right, you've now shown them. Now, can you stop doing that? Emily asked in a playful tone. Death let go and sat up, licking her lips.
Wait, if you don't have a physical body, how are you standing?
Pearl asked, trying to be polite. I possess somebody from my world, Death responded, pulling out a dagger that seemed to glow like green. What? Mare trailed off. It's a poison blade, made to kill mortals, Death replied, smiling devilishly. Mare clutched her head. Pearl looked at her with urgency.
Are you sure you're alright?
Pearl whispered. Mare's nodded, only to clutch her head more. Yeah, Mare whispered. And she opened the door and went outside. I'm going back to my castle. I'll see you guys later, Mare exclaimed and disappeared. Legend looked at Pearl with a questioning look. Nightmares has a castle? Legend asked.
You haven't been here for a long time, haven't you?
Pearl replied. Legend's ears pricked up and her cheeks flushed a bright pink. Pearl laughed.
You're so gullible at sometimes.
Pearl chuckled, particles floating off Legend's body as she smiled. What's going on with Legend? Emily asked, putting her hand on the hilt of her sword. Oh, my strength came back, Legend said, standing up and going outside. The others followed. Legend grabbed a wooden stick and went over to a sheep. Observe, Legend joked, smacking the sheep on the side as smoke came from the sheep remains, which were some raw mutton and some wool. Emily hid behind Death. She didn't really like seeing animals killed. Death smiled at her judgingly, and Emily returned it with a glare. Pearl was intrigued by the two.
So, what is your story? I mean, how did you end up here other than the portal thing?
Pearl asked, sitting down. Emily joined her. Well, back where me and Death come from, there is lush green grass and beautiful trees that are as tall as the sky. Some villages are wonderful. You can always expect some comfort when you go to one, but it's not all that good. We are in the middle of a war that has lasted for over 100 years, and I am part of a resistance to fight for our lands. Death is just part of me that I saved, and there is this prophecy, Emily exclaimed, and for once Death saw her smile fade and turn to rage.
What are the main types of people there?
Pearl asked. Well, there are humans, the demons, and the Nino, and there used to be the Viren, Emily replied. Viren? Legend asked. A look of confusion spread across her face. Yes, they are the most known beings of all of Valendia. They used to be called the Dragon People of the Sky, Emily said.
What's the story?
Well, okay. Long ago, there were the Viren and the Demon. They ruled over the land of Valendia before humans came from the other worlds. But anyway, the Viren were made along with the land. Each clan signified the power they were bestowed when they were created. There are the 8 clans of nature, the 5 clans of human, and the 3 clans of power, Emily said, using her powers to make shadow puppets. The first clan to be made was the Stone Clan. They lived close to the growing valleys, but still on the mountains. They were able to turn into stone statues and able to transform into any shape they could when they were a statue. They were peaceful dragons who didn't want to hurt anyone or anything. Their skin looked like smooth stone, and their scales looked like tiny bones. Emily continued. Bones? Legend asked, getting hyped up. Emily nodded. Next came the Ice Clan. They lived on the very tops of mountains and in the snowy tundra. They were able to teleport through the snow and ice. They were neutral people. They would fight only if they needed to. Their bodies could withstand 0 degrees at most, and their scales looked like freshly fallen snow. And they were as tough as packed ice. Emily paused, looking down at the ground.
What were the others?
Pearl questioned. Well, the 8 nature clans were stone, ice, sky, leaf, fire, time, water, and life, Emily replied, smiling. What about the human clans? Legend asked. The human clans were mimic, they could mimic anything but power. Dance, who affected the mood of other things with their dancing. Physical, who could overpower any enemy. Mind, they could control anyone or make them think things and do things they would never do. And steel, they associated with metals and tools. They were the ones who made the villages for the other clans, other than sky and fire. Emily exclaimed, her smile widening. At least her mood had improved. Okay, tell them about the power clans, Death said excitedly. Okay, The three power clans were the ones who only took the form of humans, and were the only clans that could. The first of them was creation. They would create anything, hence making things come to life. They had the abilities of all the clans other than destruction and shadow. Then there was destruction. They could kill anything that ticked them off, and whatever they touched would decay slowly. Then there was shadow. Their body was literally see-through. They could only be seen in darkness, and they weren't the type of people you'd want to mess with. They could see the future along with time. That is why they're known for the prophecy makers. Emily lowered her voice at the last two words.
Can you tell us about the prophecy?
Pearl asked. What prophecy? Legend asked, eating a raw mutton. The prophecy of the next queen, Death said, sitting next to Emily. Pearl noticed that the grass was starting to die whenever Death would touch it. Can you tell it to us? Legend asked. Death nodded. The prophecy foretells that a child would come from the heavens above to protect everyone that we love. They would wield a sword that looks like the sky but fears the one with the fermented eye. And it would choose the child that would fight the darkness and restore the hearts of the heartless. And they would face trials that would test their determination. And they would overcome them with no discrimination. And they will make a final stand and be declared ruler of all the land. The child will have both Nino and Varn blood, and be friends with everyone, even a single dot. Death said as Emily used the shadow puppets to make it look like in the prophecy. Then sun began to hide under the horizon as Pearl and Legend stood up.
Thanks for telling us about your world, but we really should be getting to bed,
Pearl said, helping Emily up. Death and Emily nodded and headed toward the settlement, while Pearl headed to her house. The dark day. As Pearl drifted to sleep, she saw something. It was almost invisible, but Pearl knew it was there. Then darkness took her, and she was pulled into a wavy vision. She saw Legend and Nightmare fighting, and she saw herself on the ground bleeding. Nightmare looked different. Her horns were bigger, and the shadow had been lifted off from her eyes. Emily was on the ground, heavily bleeding, and Death was nowhere to be seen. And as Nightmare was about to kill Legend, the vision ended. Pearl woke up in a cold sweat. She grabbed her axe and went up to the surface to see Nightmare had returned, and with more food and a couple of pieces of armor. Hiya, Nightmare said, waving. Pearl, shaken by the vision, hesitated. Mare shrugged and headed to the settlement. Pearl sprinted after her. Nightmare got to the door when Pearl stopped her. Hey! Mare asked in surprise.
What are you doing?
Pearl snapped. She was a bit protective of others, especially if she saw them die in visions. I'm giving Emily and Death some more food and armor, Mare said, trying to stay calm. Pearl was intimidating. Pearl sighed and opened the door to let Mare's in, and Mare kicked down the trapdoor. Thanks, Mare whispered.
No problem,
Pearl replied. Who wants some breakfast? Mare yelled. Emily, Death, and Legend shot up. Breakfast? They said in unison. Mare chuckled. You guys are so much alike, Mare joked. Pearl couldn't help but smile. The past year had been challenging for all of them, mostly Mare. How she had died and been sent to her form of heck. She had been there for a long time, so it was nice to see her and Legend smile. But something felt wrong, but Pearl couldn't put her finger on it. But she could tell something was wrong. Pearl stared closely at everyone and gasped.
What?
Meh. 16. At the end of 16.
Okay. Now, why are you armed?
Pearl yelled. Mare tilted her head in confusion. Why would I be? I freaking died a month ago. I don't want to take any risks, Nightmares retorted, standing up. Wait, I thought you were on your last life, Legend and Death say at the same time. Mare shook her head. I just said that so you would be more careful with me, Nightmare replied. Legend huffed in anger and looked away. Pal, you knew of this too? Legend asked, having her arms crossed.
Yes, I did, and I didn't tell you because I don't trust you that much,
Pearl replied, glaring at Legend. Mare looked at her friends. Death was enjoying herself with all the anger that was in the air. Emily just stared at them, completely confused by what was going on. What the heck are you guys talking about? Emily yelled over the commotion. Everyone paused and stared at her. But Emily was used to that notion, so she didn't feel self-conscious.
We...
Pearl stammered. Legend shook her head. We weren't talking about anything important, Legend replied, walking out the door. I got to go work on my house, Legend retorted and disappeared out the door. Mare felt bad for not telling Legend, but her having more lives. But Mare was still scared of her. Emily, what do you say that we go get some supplies? We are going to live here for one more day, Death said, motioning towards the door. Emily nodded and walked out the door and waved goodbye to Mare and Pearl. Death followed and glared at Mare. Death's eyes seemed to glow a little. Mare stepped back, grabbing the hilt of her sword. Pearl eyed her. Death and Emily walked away, and Mel relaxed and turned to Pearl. What's up with you? Mare asked, walking over to the stove and pulling out the cooked steak. A soft growl came from Pearl's throat. Nightmare stood up, grabbing her sword and held it in line of Pearl's heart. Pearl already knew what this meant. I see you figured it out. Mare's voice chuckled through the room. Pearl pulled out her axe, and Mare smiled devilishly. I have to admit, you were pretty hard to... Well, never mind. That's you.
I have to admit, you were pretty hard to point out, being in Nightmare's body and being able to control her,
Pearl said, circling Night, and she did the same. That is an understatement, Night replied and lunged at Pearl and threw her against the wall. Pearl got up, wiping blood from her mouth, and attacked back. Her axe shifted between iron and netherite. As their weapons clashed against each other, sparks began to fly. They were both at the same level of combat, and they matched each other perfectly in battle.
What did you do to Mare?
Pearl asked, blocking Nightmare's strokes. Nothing. She's completely fine as long as I do what I'm told, Nightmare replied as she pushed Pearl out the door. Pearl's shoes slid on the grass and stuck her axe into the ground. As the sun rose higher, so did Pearl's fear. What's wrong? Nightmare asked as the shadow of her eyes seemed to lighten a little.
I just thought that we could use more space,
Pearl replied as Nightmare lunged at her. Pearl used most of her might and teleported Nightmare and herself to the cliff edge near the library. Night shook her head, distorted by what just happened. She wasn't used to teleporting, but that didn't last long, as Pearl healed from her wounds teleporting. Since it takes her life energy to teleport another person with her, Nightmare jumped at her and batted her towards the cliff edge. Pearl jumped aside, but it was too late. She was thrust backwards, but was able to reclaim her feet and stopped only a couple of inches from the edge. Night chuckled devilishly and grinned at her gleefully. Pearl was enraged until teleported toward Mare. She was able to do a lot of damage and was almost about to hit her off the cliff. Pearl had noticed more things different about Nightmare as the fight progressed. The shadow of her eyes had almost gone away, and her horns were a bit taller. She also had amazing footwork, though the real Nightmare would be tripping and falling and shaking with a weapon in her hand. She had changed.
I have a couple questions for you.
Pearl said as the sun reached its peak. They had both stopped, and both were severely injured. What? Night asked, gripping her sword. Pearl's axe had changed to another axe.
Did you mean it?
Pearl asked, panting. The shadow disappeared, and Pearl saw two eyes staring at her. Nightmare's eyes were red with slits for irises. What do you think? Does it matter? Night asked, smiling devilishly.
Does it matter if I mean it or not?
Does it
I
matter?
can't do. Oh, that's not me. That's not me.
It's fine. I did to you too. It's fine. Doesn't matter if I meant it or not. I can't undo anything. Night continued, and for once Pearl saw Nightmare hesitate to do something. But she shook her head and threw her sword, knocking Pearl to the ground right on the edge of the cliff.
Wait, is that like an ah? Ah!
Pearl screamed. Night pulled out her trident and held it to Pearl's chest. But before she could do it, a spider came out of nowhere and knocked them both off the cliff. In the air, Nightmare threw her trident, impaling the spider and killing it, and then grabbed where they were.
There!
Tears began to fill Pearl's eyes. Nightmare sighed deeply. I'm sorry they had to include you in this, Nightmare replied. Pearl was slipping.
What?
Pearl asked, trying to get a better grip. She's just lost. She's hurt badly. She's broken to pieces and trying to reconnect all of them. Nightmare replied. She noticed that Pearl's hand was slipping out of her grasp.
I don't get it.
Pearl replied, holding a finger. You don't need to, Nightmare said before letting go of Pearl, who screamed in fear. But before Pearl could fall further, she grabbed Pearl by the wrist and threw her up on the cliff, only to drop herself. But Pearl grabbed her before she could fall and pulled Nightmare's up. Pearl? Nightmare asked and sat on her knees.
Can you tell me something?
Pearl asked, looking into the forest. What? Nightmare replied. The shadow had returned to her face.
What did you mean by that it was your fault?
Pearl asked, glaring at Nightmare. Chills ran up Nightmare's spine. Well, you see, Nightmare tried to say. She sighed deeply as she muttered a spell, and a bubble appeared around them. It seemed to warp reality itself. Pearl at first was alarmed, but then she realized where she was.
We're in the Nether,
Pearl said, jumping backwards. Nightmare had disappeared, but as she looked around more, she found herself in a village of some sort and saw another portal. Pearl jumped for joy and ran over to it, only to be stopped by a group of people. As she tried to push her way through, she tripped over and found herself standing at the front. It seemed like everyone in town was there. Pearl tried to move to the nether portal, but she couldn't move. Her feet were glued to the floor. She saw the group part at one side and two guardsmen armed with spears, and the child walked to the middle where the nether portal was. Today we gather here to banish this insult of our race. We, the proud Netherkin, are one of the best. We fight with honor, and we do it with vengeance. But this insolent child thinks that everything we do is a joke. She has no powers, she is weak as heck, and she can't even do a single thing right, an announcer yelled. Pearl suddenly felt a rush of anger.
What? She's just a child. What else do they know? They're supposed to be fun and outgoing with their lives. I expect, especially to be free.
Pearl thought, enraged by what the announcer was saying. She looked at the child and had a feeling of familiarity. And when the announcer was done speaking, the two gods pointed their spears at her. She shall be banished from our lands until she has real power, the announcer said for the final time, as the girl was forced into the portal. Then reality switched again, and Pearl saw that she was in the other world. She was happy to be there and not in the nether. The portal was closed, and a sack lay next to the girl. She woke up and grabbed the bag and flung it over her shoulder and began walking on the paved path toward what seemed to be a grassland. Pearl followed the girl.